a piece of art is kind of like a mirror that shows at least one part of the artist. So it's kind of like them holding up a mirror to say, like, this is me, but you also get to kind of see yourself in it or a part of yourself as you interpret it or experience it. So
Yeah.
I felt like the more art I saw, the more pieces of myself I saw or understood, or at least was kind of prompted to inquire about internally.
GM, and welcome to the Boonafide Experience podcast. I am your host, Kyle, but really, most people, they just call me Boona. This is a Web3 podcast that curates the stories of artists, builders, collectors, and true visionaries who are all pushing the boundaries of technology to create a brighter future for all. That was Funghibull talking about one of the main reasons he collects art. Funghibull is one of my favorite people in the NFT space, have grown to call him a great friend over the past year. He is the co-founder of a native Web3 marketing agency called Shillr, is a superb collector and has great taste in art, and just an overall gem of a human being. We dive into how he found NFTs, why he collects art, the origins of Shillr, lessons learned from the bull, comparison to the last, also a comparison to the last bear cycle and how it's better. As always, this podcast is meant to be for entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment advice. Boona and guests may own NFTs mentioned in this recording. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the show.
GM Funghi, how are you?
GM, I'm doing really well, thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, man. I think we've been chatting for quite some time, man, and I'm just like, you know what? I haven't had a whole lot of collectors on. Funghi just seems like he's one of the dopest art collectors. And I was like, man, like the vibe's right, and we get to do a little learning and get to see the other side of the coin of a lot of people that make up this Web3 space.
Well, thanks so much for saying that. I was just thinking like, wow, I'm grateful for Hologram for not programming in like blushing AI recognition. Because yeah, I was just like smiling and yeah, blushing away. But yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the kind words and love what you do with your podcast. You've facilitated some amazing conversations with some of my favorite artists in the world and some really cool builders in the space. So yeah, it's an honor to be on, and long-time listener, first-time caller.
Man, we're going to coin that. I love that, dude. That gave me goosebumps. So I think the feeling's mutual, man. It's just, this space has been super interesting because I think, you know, my podcasting background before this was like super not like the people that I vibed with. Like there's a very select few people that I vibed with, but I've never met such a like crazy group of people that like I trust incredibly, that have the same type of like curiosity and vibe and just also tenacity. Like it's like all business in the front, but it's all like play in the front, but it's like business in the back, you know, and like everyone here is just making shit happen. And so like I've always kind of felt crazy for like just following the vibe, you know, like
Totally.
that's literally what this space is run off of, you know?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like to me, like this space offers such a massive amount of opportunity. And as you mentioned, like connection with very like-minded people. I think that's a huge part, like the, you know, talent and kindness, you know, optimism, I think, of people in this space who have kind of given a chance to take a peek behind the veil at, you know, what could possibly be if given the to flatten power structures and, you know, function off of like tenets of decentralization and and like get rid of a lot of the not great stuff that we've arbitrarily and non-consensually prescribed to since we were born. So it's like, it's a bunch of people who are like maybe looking at the world a little differently and their futures, who are really fired up to be here and, you know, bringing that energy into relationship building and product and, you know, art creating on a daily basis, which is super dope.
Yeah, dude, I love how you just like rolled off some really heavy topics of like, yeah, we just like had this shit forced down our throat, you know, like we didn't really ask for it. And you just say it, it's like, yeah, we just weren't prescribed it. Like we just, it's like super nonchalant way of saying it, man. It's super interesting, man. And I think that's a great like segue into like, how did you like find out like about this space, man? Like what got you curious? Where did you like, how did you first learn? Because this is not, you know, we're still, contrary to the meme, like we're still very early and none of this is really super easy, you know, like once you get it, you get it. But it's like the intro and on ramp, at least for me, was like, it took a good like 6 months for me to even feel comfortable making my first transaction.
For sure. Yeah, we're very much in a bubble or a minority in terms of like conceptualizing or viewing things as like, where are we on the spectrum of mass adoption? Like we are very early. You could just like empirically look at active wallets, especially active wallets during a bear market.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, for me, I had been aware of crypto for a long time. It wasn't super early into investing in crypto or trading. I joined, you know, relatively recently, I would say. Like I had, you know, been picking up crypto when I could, buying here and there. And then in 2020, had a really close friend, someone I always looked up to as being, you know, just one of the smartest people I'd ever met and knew they were one of the smartest people I'd ever meet. And yeah, always had a really interesting way of seeing the world and problem solving. Using like his intelligence and creativity to figure things out. And I had noticed prior to 2020, and this is Alex Gosman, by the way, founder of NFTX. So prior to 2020, he'd been occasionally tweeting and posting on all social platforms like buy ETH once every some amount of months. And it always cracked me up. And I was like, I don't know. I wasn't really like listening. I didn't like engage him in dialogue that much about it. Was very much like a spectator for the most part. And then in 2020, he was talking about it a lot more. I saw what he was building with NFTX, talked to him about punks specifically, and kind of like the bull thesis of punks. He wrote like a really, or I should say co-authored a great essay on CryptoPunks and the space and where it could be going, and was investing in them and trading them in autoglyphs specifically quite a lot. And you know, was into punks like sub, I think $1,000.
That's such a weird like flashback right there. I was
it's pretty crazy. Like it you know, it's definitely fun to think about that time and the people before him. But before I get too sidetracked, so I talked to him a bit about it, and then I think I was using like TikTok at the time, and have always had like, I don't know, a bit of a trend spotting or analysis leaning brain, and had just noticed like the frequency of me seeing references to crypto, to digital assets was starting to increase. Like it wasn't common. Definitely wasn't a daily thing. But eventually I was like, I should call Gosman. And convinced me to yeet a bunch of my money, like most of it, into like, in terms of like, you know, money that was just chilling, into a couple punks. And at the end of 2020, and it just worked out to be like a very lucky timed event for me. So I'm not like, I always try and get that out there that I am in no way like a crypto or punk OG. I'm not necessarily a smart person. I got exceptionally lucky and just like bought a couple things at the right time. But it was enough having that like, you know, meaningful investment made me realize like, okay, I need to learn more. I need to get more kind of intentionally invested, energetically invested. And that's when I like created a Twitter account. I never really used Twitter before, and started to like really try and absorb as much as possible, just following the people I thought were smart. Definitely was a reply guy. I mean, still am, I would say, but like was like, yeah, just, I don't know, trying to learn as much as possible. I got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm working this full-time job outside of Web3. I need to not be doing that, but I shouldn't necessarily quit. So I managed to like pack my 8 hours of work into like 3, and then would spend 5 on Twitter and like on Clubhouse and stuff, just listening and reading and tweeting into the void. And yeah, and eventually went to an Accelerate Art exhibition that was Punk 4156's Ape Stage Capitalism exhibition, a bunch of incredible art he had picked up. And I was listening to, so I was attending in Crypto Voxels in like a custom build that I think Gareth maybe from Accelerate Art had put together, listening to Claire interview the artists in Crypto Voxels. So we were on like Clubhouse, but on our phones, walking around Crypto Voxels on desktop. And it was like the craziest gallery experience I'd ever been to. I think this was like April or March 2021. And 4156 was like super anonymous, had never spoken or had their voice go live or anything. Yeah. So Claire was like transcribing or translating, I guess, for him and asking questions on his behalf. And then eventually, I believe it was Matt Fury started talking about his piece in 4156's collection. And yeah, 4156 just got so excited because Matt's one of his like favorite artists, I guess, and kind of cultural contributors, that he like broke his voice and started talking. And it was, I remember it was this like exciting moment in time. And yeah, and that was like a pivotal experience for me. After that, I like really doubled down and was like, all right, I've been to galleries, like lucky to go to museums and galleries around the world. Didn't have like a huge background in art, but had just done a bit of traveling. And I was like, this was the best gallery experience I've ever had. Like this beat everything else because of how interactive it was, because these artists had directly sold their own work, not had to go through any kind of intermediary. And because there was this, a couple of extremely anonymous digital identities or pseudonymous identities, Claire and 4156, expressing themselves, and yeah, completely unknown elsewhere. It's just, yeah, really, really dope. And I was like, this is super cool. And the kind of blend of, I guess, like mixed reality of listening to effectively like a Twitter space or Clubhouse and walking around in virtual space. And it's like, this is dope. so yeah, I would like full send committed after that.
Man, thank you for like sharing all of those details. Cause I feel like, and when you told me about that moment where 4156 broke his like anonymity, with Matt Fury, like that sent chills down my spine, because I feel like there's like, I think one of the common themes, or at least in my experience, is that I wasn't there for the Beeple sale, but I was there in the Clubhouse room after with the two buyers, like Metakoven and Tubador. And like what I didn't know at the time, Justin Blau and like all these other people. And it was like, there's these moments where it just like captivates, and like we don't really know why it's captivating, but it's just so fucking captivating. And they were just talking about all these new concepts that I never heard before. So I appreciate you like taking us like down memory lane, because I feel like it's something that's lost on a lot of people, a lot of newcomers that come here. And granted, the space is very different than it was then. Even though we're still very early, I feel like that was just like negative time, if that's even possible. We weren't even at 0 yet. It was just still very underground and grassroots. And moments like that are what I like to like highlight and capture and help people. Like, if you haven't found that moment, like just wait. If you keep participating, if it's interesting enough to like, if it has your curiosity and if you're interested enough, and then like that moment will typically come. Because it took, a few, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it took you, it wasn't like immediately after you started figuring out about the space where you kind of like went to that event in CryptoVoxels. So I don't know, man. It's a wild thing to like hear some of those early days. And at the time, you probably had no idea that like 4156 was going to become what he became, throughout throughout time here.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think it's important to remember those moments, and as just like you said, to communicate. Like, most people that are here right now who have endured both a bull market and are now in this bear market, or I'm kind of calling it the fuck around and find out market for the time being. And yeah, I feel like those people have most likely had those moments. But when things are maybe a little more stagnant or uncertain, I think it can be easy to forget those moments, even if you've had them. So it's nice to think about that time. I'm very like grateful to all of the people that are way ahead of me in kind of paving a way for the rest of us, in setting up like the rails and the just kind of everything that led up to where we are now. And yeah, 4156 was like I think he was pretty big back then still. Like, he was big time collector. I think he like meme bid 420 ETH on the Matt Fury, like outbid someone by like 100 ETH, like just to hit 420, which was insane. And so I remember being like, this is great. I didn't really know much about him other than like, I liked a lot of these artists that he had collected from. And yeah, I think the point about him speaking, because I'm always like, it's not necessarily like a reverence for him. And I don't mean that in like a disrespectful way, but I think it stands out in memory because it was an inflection point for me to like grasp how important his digital identity was up until that point.
Yeah.
And what it took for him to at least share his voice. And then in the latter part, it was very infectious, like the excitement that he had to connect with an artist that he deeply admired. And that, I think it was those kind of two things that really stood out to me. It wasn't necessarily that it was that it was him, but yeah, just like the kind of experience of, someone who had a very anonymous digital identity, and then someone who would compromise some degree of that identity out of excitement to connect with an artist in a virtual environment, which is really cool.
I think that's one of the things that excited me the most. And I'm going to draw back to a conversation that I had with Zaid, and he asked me like, why do you collect art, like digital art? Why do you like collecting digital art over physical art? And it was like, for the way I answered it is like, he's like, and don't tell me the wall space. I was like, okay, because that was going to be my first answer, was I don't have enough wall space to collect art. But very similar to you, I didn't have an art background. I never really collected art before I came here. And I think you touched on something that resonated with me a lot, which is like, it's almost like I collect relationships. And there's something about a transaction that takes place that allows a relationship to form that I find incredibly valuable, and the fact that I just have this like unlimited backpack, or this bottomless pit of a backpack called a wallet, where I can just like collect all of my art and never run out of space. But it's also like I get to form these incredibly strong bonds with some of the most creative minds in the world, and I think that to me is the most valuable thing that I've taken away since I've been here. It's like, holy shit, I'm rubbing shoulders with people that are just creating really dope shit, whether it's building it, whether it's whether it's creating meaningful art or building products. I don't know, man. That to me is like one of the selling points and I can't really describe it. It's hard to really put into words when I really think about it.
Yeah, it totally is. Like, why? It's a really good question. Like, why do you collect digital or tokenized digital art?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's cool
Yeah.
that I shout out Zaid, also one of my favorite artists in the whole damn world and gem of a human being. It's a great kind of like great question.
So I guess I'll turn that. Is that, do you have a similar answer, or what is it that kind of like drew you into, like, what is one of the main reasons you like to collect digitally without an art background?
And so this is, yeah, okay. So we're just talking about art. We're not talking about like, insert adjective plus animal,
Yeah.
or even like collectibles per se.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for art, I would say my answer is pretty similar. I do have like, not to say it's a wall space thing. It's definitely not that, but I am kind of related to that. I am very bullish in the what I believe to be the eventual mass adoption of the acceptance of digital life. I'm bullish on that, and that encapsulates digital assets. So there's that part of things, and it is nice to have a backpack that you never like. It's not like when you're playing, Elder Scrolls, it's like you are over encumbered. Like you're good as long as as long as you have the ETH to pay gas to move it around. Like you're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that kind of aspect. But I think for me, yeah, I totally agree. Like it feels great to
Yeah.
directly support artists. I grew up, as I think many people did, being told that it's crazy to think about being an artist. Like that's not
Yep.
what your career school counselor tells you to do. Like even
Mm-hmm.
if, to the most talented artists out there, I'm sure almost, practically no one has told them to pursue that full time aside from, maybe other artists, if even if that, or a loving friend or family member. So to me, the ability to directly support what I consider and have grown for sure over the past year, grown to consider in a deeper way, extremely brave people who
Mm.
have put their all into creating an environment within themselves and around themselves where they can pursue their passion that is art. And I've definitely grown to see art as one of the most vulnerable forms of communication. And so I find both of those things deeply inspiring. And I've noticed since I got into this space, it definitely took me a while to start paying attention more closely to the art side of things. Like I've always loved art, been a very casual enjoyer, was never into collecting art. But yeah, so getting into the space, I started seeing it more, started following more artists. And I noticed that just by seeing art, I was happier. Like
Mm.
by being on Twitter and having my timeline be maybe 2/3 art, or like 1/3 art, 1/3 shit posting, and like 1/3 like great ideas or bad takes.
So
My life
fair.
was better, but the real understanding was like it was the art part. It was helping me. It was making me feel more creative. It felt like this beautiful, colorful antidepressant that you never had to go to the pharmacy for. I was just like feeling like a more fulfilled person. And also I noticed it was like helping me understand myself better because yeah, I think, you know, a piece of art is kind of like a mirror that shows at least one part of the artist. So it's kind of like them holding up a mirror to say, like, this is me, but you also get to kind of see yourself in it or a part of yourself as you interpret it or experience it. So
Yeah.
I felt like the more art I saw, the more pieces of myself I saw or understood, or at least was kind of prompted to inquire about internally. And yeah, I just really valued that. And then, learning more about the kind of art market, realizing that, my prior focus of trading NFTs like PFPs and collectibles, that, you know, a lot of those projects were not going to stand the test of time, or at least their you know, prices weren't going to stand the test of time relative to where I entered, or maybe had chosen not to sell, unfortunately. You know, artists that are truly intrinsically driven to create and just live their art and their passion, and kind of will stop at nothing to pursue it. It's like, I don't know, like it's a really that's a really good person to invest in. And like, and I haven't collected art, you know, for flipping. I think I've only sold, I don't know, a couple pieces out of a lot more than that I've collected. But you know, you also think like, well, even if the artist like doesn't work out, when I'm looking, you know, comparing my OpenSea, you know, comparing it, if I auto select all or view all PFPs and 10K projects, doesn't spark joy looking at massive bags of ones that are down horrendously. Whereas like I've collected pieces of art that like haven't appreciated in value or are just completely illiquid, and I just don't give a shit, man. Like I just like, I really don't care because they're beautiful. And I, you know, something in the moment, like I saw something in the moment I collected it or saw it that made me want to pick it up, and it, you know, I hope helps someone. And so there's no kind of like hard feelings after that. And I noticed as well that while, sorry, this is like the most long-winded, I'm way too over caffeinated right now. Yeah, I noticed as well that because I was so focused on PFPs and quick flips in the beginning of my, you know, of the bull run and my kind of entry into the NFT space, I said no, or at least just didn't pursue collecting art from people that I did recognize would be here for a long time. There was like some cognitive dissonance where I was like, oh yeah, like Claire Silver for sure, believe in her. Like she's going to go on and do great things. But since I am a person who has never collected art before, spending, you know, a quarter of an ETH or half an ETH or 1 ETH on a piece of art, yeah, sounds crazy. Like I could use that ETH to mint 20 like, you know, crazy flipped dogs and sell them for more tomorrow. And it was just like, that was like, in all honesty, where I was kind of at. And that happened with a few artists. Claire's for sure one, ACK is another. And yeah, and like when the market took a turn and my PFP bags are really down, I looked at a lot of those artists that I had, you know, on some level consciously chosen not to collect their work from when I was a PFP maxi, or at least PFP trading maxi. And so I was like, oh shit, if I had spent like a tenth of the amount that I spent on NFT of PFPs on art from artists I resonated with back then, I'd be up way more. Like so much more, you know, especially with like artists like Claire and ACK. And it made me like rethink the kind of investment thesis of betting on, you know, soul creators that are driven beyond everything to create.
I mean, dude, there's a lot that you said there that I really resonated with. And I think the last part, we'll dive into a few of them, but off the top of my head, it's one of the reasons why, on your last point, is why I've, like, with very few exceptions, you know, like everyone since I've come into the Web3 space has been an individual creator, because it's a lot easier to bet on an individual than it is a team. It's so much more fun when this is like kind of like resurfacing your other point of like people that are just going to continue to create regardless of market conditions. They were creating before NFTs, most of them were, and they're going to continue creating even if this is all big experiment goes to zero, which I hope it doesn't. I don't believe it will. It just feels inevitable. It's just the outcome is hopefully the one that we want. But that was a lot of like why I chose to, interview who I interview is because number one, I was still also very new to the technology, and people like, I had no, just to share, I had no conception of markets before this. Like I wasn't a trader. I didn't have like a whole lot of financial literacy when it came to like, markets and trading and behaviors and how things worked. And so like when the bull run happened last year, I didn't know what the fuck to think. Like I just didn't know what to do. So I literally tucked away in my little studio that we're in here. And I was like, let me just talk to like individual people who are really vulnerable like me and create dope work. Like that was like as simple. It was just as simple as that, And that was, to your point earlier, is that like I think if I want to add to one of the reasons why I collect is that I'm naturally a very sensitive and vulnerable person, and like to meet people that have the same level of vulnerability and sensitivity is like, I'm like, oh, like you people exist, There's people like me that exist out there, and it's just a magical thing, man. But
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm really happy for you and happy for all the other people who are, have gotten to experience that. So that's super cool to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's definitely been an incentive to like learn about markets and, macro economy stuff and trading and all that jazz.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's intimidating at the time. It's like, what an interesting time to be learning about financial markets in the space where everything is kind of just like, nothing is predictable anymore. That, it's wild, but it's also where the most information can be absorbed because, like what I think I enjoy, and I think you probably like see this too, is that like, quote unquote, the way things were are not the way things were anymore. Like that kind of like narrative is crumbling a little bit. It's like, with everything that's happening, we don't really know what the way things are supposed to be. And there's a lot of it opens the door for a lot of new innovation. It opens the door for a lot more creativity, and I think that's what's most exciting to me. But yeah, man, kind of like shifting, directions a little bit. Like, so you got in here, you're collecting all this amazing work. And then, how did Shillr come about? Like how did you like meet Bernardo and Rugma and Connor and all these other people? Like, cause I feel like you guys have built some of these really cool or like built a really cool Web3 native company and are like incredibly successful.
Thanks. Yeah. It's really kind of you to say. Yeah. It's kind of funny how it started. Brugema just put a tweet out one day, and I guess I was following him or just noticed it on the timeline, probably in like, I don't know, May of maybe prior to May of 2021. Yeah. And it was like, hey, thinking of starting a consulting and marketing company in the Web3 space. Like, would anyone be interested in getting involved? And a few of us responded. And within, 24 hours, we had like, or I think within 24 hours of our first kind of, within 24 hours or 48 hours, something like that, we had like a Discord set up. We had a meeting. Wow. We had a website. We had some branding and I had come up with the name and figured out like really what we wanted to do and what kind of impact we wanted to have. And secured the ENS, of course. And and then it just kind of blossomed from there with a handful of, really brilliant people who had backgrounds in, marketing, in data analytics, finance, consulting, design, a bunch of stuff and startup culture. And who were just deeply passionate about the space and had noticed that, there's so many great projects and protocols and artists out there that are not getting the spotlight that we collectively thought they deserved. But then a bunch of, maybe more hype driven, short-term focused, dilutive dilutive projects were getting a ton of attention. And we're like, and a lot of that attention was often coming from not great marketing methods of like, backdoor deals and, influencer promotions and yeah, and just like not great stuff. And so, yeah, I came up with the name Shillr and was like, shilling gets such a bad rap in this space, kind of rightfully so, but fundamentally there's nothing wrong with it. Like the concept of marketing, but what if we endeavored to be the first transparent marketing consulting company in the NFT and Web3 space? And yeah, that's kind of how we started with, no clear or defined set of who we would work with, just people that we thought were bringing value to the space, that we would genuinely want to like hop on a phone call with and chat with and work with, and who we would choose to support regardless of any kind of professional involvement. And so, yeah, it's been like that was like over a year and a half ago. And we very quickly all went full time on it. And once we did that, I was like, all right, my days are numbered in my Web2 job. I got to get out of here. It was getting to the point I was like, I'm either going to massively fail at, helping to get Shillr off the ground, or I'm going to get fired because I have been doing, 3-hour, 8-hour work days for way too long. And somehow getting, good kind of performance reviews. I think it was just like my motivation was really high to make
it all happen.
And yeah, to make it all happen. So
yeah.
But I was getting close to my end where I was like, this isn't good. Like I'm being a bad employee and a bad co-founder at the same time. So so eventually when I went full-time first, I think, and then very shortly after the rest of the team did. And yeah, we've gotten to operate in the space for a year and a half, and things have gone really well. Shout out to everyone that has, entrusted us to work with them or supported us. It's been super fun. And, I very much view the time elapsed since we started as, the beginning still. Like we're definitely just getting started and have a lot of redacted things planned. I just had to catch myself before I said too much, but yeah, we got a lot of things planned, and it's been a great time.
Something very interesting that you mentioned was like the first marketing agency built on transparency. Like what? Like I'm curious about that a little bit. Is that like what does that entail?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like a very nebulous term. I mean, marketing in general is fucking nebulous. Like,
right.
And like, as someone who does marketing, I like catch myself all the time. I'm like, I'm kind of talking out of my ass right now. Like, I'm not saying things very, very clearly. So I appreciate the call out. I would say, the things like we focus on strictly organic growth. And what that means is that, we never do paid promotions. We never do, paid influencer promotions or Telegram chats. We don't do ads. We very much like situate ourselves as much as we can, as much as our like partnered clients will allow us to try and situate ourselves on their on their team to help steer the ship to some degree, like in a little way. Like we definitely don't, like it's mostly them. But yeah, so we always make sure to disclose absolutely everyone that we work with. We always make personal disclosures. So if I'm hosting a Twitter space with, one of our clients, it's like at the beginning, like, hey, as a transparency reminder, I'm working with this team. Yeah, not financial advice, whatever. But yeah, really try and make it abundantly clear above board that we have a professional relationship and that, the listener or whoever's seeing the tweet or whatever should be mindful of that and like do their own research. So that's one way in which we kind of operate. Another way is, the term organic, again, is very nebulous. So it includes like not doing the paid stuff, not doing like under the table promos and things like that. It also includes just not overhyping things. And so a really big part of what we work on is just communication and obviously like strategy of communication. So, everyone, I'm a firm believer that everyone, whether they're like, a creator, just a human being, or like a project or protocol, like they are trying to do something for a reason. And there is a story of how they got there. And there's a story of like where they're trying to go. And there's tangible things that they're doing to get there and things that they will try to do as soon as is possible to them. So a really big part is just like sitting down with teams and being like, well, what are you trying to do? Like, what do you want people to know about you? And making sure that, their messaging is really clear, but also appealing, and is never venturing into the realms of just like undue hype or promising the moon and delivering, sludge. Like, yeah. So like we always will like check in with our clients and say like, well, what can you deliver, and try and make sure that we're conveying like value props or why people might be interested, but do it really honestly. Of course, like, you make that messaging like appealing and you try and make it so everyone's interested in it. But ultimately, just trying to help these people and companies and products find like their tribe or their natural organic communities that are already interested in that kind of idea or product, service, whatever it is. And yeah, so I'd say that's kind of what we do. There's definitely more into that. I think some of the stuff we do on the back end, is more on a consulting side. I'd say a ton of our work goes into that. So consulting on like, as active traders and participators and degenerates to some degree, we know what we want and we know, the things that are truly of value. And so at every possible opportunity, we try and suggest, things that the teams we work with could do to provide a better experience and to provide more value. And when things don't go right, which, they often don't in this space, it's a volatile industry in the world, to be really receptive of that and to like pivot in authentic ways and to like call out things that haven't gone well and then take community feedback to do better. So yeah, that's like in a nutshell what we do. And then we have a nonprofit sort of arm. We try and help artists. That's like unrelated to our client work, but yeah, something that we're definitely have enjoyed leaning into.
Dude, I like that. And it reminded me of something I saw on Twitter from Fwiz about like when you're talking about when things inevitably don't like go right, which, a lot of times they don't. And this space is really interesting, is like you need to have like a 5-year plan and then like a 5-week plan and like a 5-minute plan when you're running this, because there's things that happen on a day-to-day basis and it's so hard to keep up with. And I look at some of these projects that are successful and I really admire that, because it's just like, it's, while the opportunity is there, like it's a lot different than the way things used to be, or the way things, I guess you could say, currently are with like non-Web3 companies. And that's something that or the ones that like succeed and the ones that kind of like can make it through some of the trials and tribulations. I mean, this is like, I'm trying to paint this picture of like, while it looks very easy, I'm trying to say that you guys make it like a lot of people here who are successful make it look really easy, but it's actually not. There's a lot that goes into this, and there's a lot of thought that gets put into it around this, all around these like digital community, or like, yeah, I guess these digital identity communities that are currently being formed. You know what I mean? And yeah, dude, just wanted to take a peek under the hood because it sometimes I don't all just like great art, I don't always know why I feel something. I just know I feel something. And so it's always great to like hear the explanation behind that and to like hear, how you guys traditionally function and how you guys separate yourselves from like other companies.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, happy to shed some light on it. Like we've kind of had this running joke since we founded Shillr that we will never shill Shillr. And like we took that quite literally. We're like, the strongest marketing in the world is indirect marketing. You know how they say like you are what people say about you when you're not there.
Yeah.
And so we've tried to really embody that. But with that, when you've been around for like I think we're probably the oldest or one of the newest. I'd have to check the social chain, but we're one of the oldest kind of marketing consulting companies, and we've tried to embody that, but with the not shilling Shillr. People are always like, what the fuck do you guys do? Like I don't know anything about you. And so I'm happy to help paint a little picture. And honestly, like I appreciate the props. I think a big part, and I've got to, give some love to the people that we've worked with. Like your job is way easier when you filter who you work with and who you represent. So that's been a really big part of how we've operated. Like, as I said, like we only work with people that we would support, whether that, it's an NFT project, it's like a project we would mint ourselves and we're excited about. If it's a, platform like hologram, it's something that I'm stoked to be able to use. And it's like really, not going to shill hologram. Check them out though. No, I'm just kidding. But it helps a lot. And I think one of the coolest things about what we've done has been to, work in the marketing space and NFTs and Web3 for longer than most people or most companies. And from, maybe I live in an echo chamber, and I'm sure I do to some degree, but I feel like our, community sentiment or like, it seems like, people have not disliked us massively over time, which I think is kind of rare. And so that's probably one of the things I'm proudest about. And a big part of that is just like choosing to work with great people. We've really tried to do that this whole time, and kind of put it at the forefront of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it makes things a lot easier. It really does. And I've noticed that just in the area that I, obviously in podcasting of what I do as well as, there's been some people that I've had on that like, I kind of was, I was like on the fence, especially in the esports days or, whatever the case may be. But then when it was like, when I actually sought out the person, I was like, damn, like it makes things a lot easier when you do that. And I think the follow-up question I have to that is, do you think that like whether it's collecting art, collecting, like strong teams and digital collectibles, has that like, is that kind of like, have you learned anything from that that's like that you've taken to Shillr to like help strengthen your brand?
Yeah, I would say, I think Claire Silver was the first person I saw say this, and I'm not sure if Claire still has it in her bio, that taste is the taste is the new skill or something.
Yeah.
And then I think that it kind of turned into, for me at least, like curation is the new skill. And curation is like somewhat of a surgical term. Like it is, I now feel like vibe check is the new curation, is the new taste. Like it's a much more, widely encompassing way of assessing, like, do I like this? Do I like it for the right reasons? Do I notice that, I deeply feel like I want to support this and want to like do this thing or partner with this person or collect this art? Am I doing it out of purely excitement, or am I doing it out of some like grounded sense of like intrinsic desire to support or participate? And
Sure.
yeah, I think, there's been a huge overlap with like that for me, for art collecting, for, building relationships and choosing who to do that with, or approach, to be like, hey, I think you're dope. Like, would love to chat sometime. And to, what we do at Shillr, like, I think for sure, like and maybe it was Trill, or he, I think, said like cultivating an understanding and sense of conviction that you act on is like one of the most important skills you could possibly learn in this space in particular. And, I would just like insert vibe check over, just like cultivating the skill of vibe checking things is so important, especially when you are rarely seeing someone in person. Because I do think there is freedom. That's like one of the pitfalls of digital identity. It's often very two-dimensional, and it's easy to fill in the gaps with what you want to see and not what is really there. Meaning that you can overestimate someone or some project's character out of your like desire to do so.
Yeah. Dude, that was, I think that's been one of the biggest lessons I've learned, is like, taking off the rose colored glasses of like what's real and what is it that I want to be real. They're two very different questions. It usually, especially last year, when everything was crazy and up only, is that usually two different answers. And it's wild to grow. And I'm gonna sidestep it. Is I think it was, for the longest time, I think it was like after like October, November, December, I was like, man, this is great. I love up only, but like, fuck, man, like I need a break. Like this is exhausting, to just try to keep up with all of this. And I was like secretly hoping for a bear market sooner rather than later, because like I knew that a lot of my perspective would probably change, walking through that. ETH would be on sale, art would be on sale again, and so I could finally get to collect, selfishly collect some of the pieces I've always wanted to from some of my favorite artists. But I just remember how unsustainable it felt, when we were kind of like just peak euphoria WAGMI vibes. I mean, so when it comes to that, like, so you got in like right around 2020, which was kind of like end of the bear market. Or like, well, no, I wouldn't say end of it. End of it was 2021. Do you notice anything like different or the same like now versus then? Or like, do you feel like this is worse in ways or not as worse in other ways?
I think it's only gotten better. Yeah. I definitely experienced a massive dopamine withdrawal, as I think we all did. And that fucking sucked. Like, trying to go to sleep, like, why didn't I buy Bored Apes? God damn it. Like, and why didn't my hypothetical self that bought them sell them at the top? Like, just like, many, like, it took me a while to get over that, if I'm being real. Like, despite also having that same sense of like, holy shit, my body needs a break. Like, I think my body physically broke down like twice during the bull market because I was so exhausted. But yeah, I think like since then, I have much more conviction in
Mm.
the space, even with all of the FTX stuff and
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
else that's gone down. As shitty as it is, and as much kind of like, yeah, at least bad. And I really feel for everyone affected directly, aside from SBF. Uh, but
Yeah.
like all of those things are a bull case for self custody and decentralization. And yeah, so like even there's always I think things to take away. And I feel like a lot of the opportunists, and we're all fucking opportunists. Like
Yeah.
we're in this goddamn space, but like a lot of the very short term minded opportunists have dipped, or at least it feels like it. And the again, like when I joined, the concentration of like great people that I wanted to talk to was very high, but now it feels like it's even greater. Like there's even,
Yeah.
more people like that out of the in total number of like active, I don't know, people tweeting about NFTs or executing wallet transactions. Like, yeah. And like, a few things I think have gotten way better. Like there's, we've experienced in the past couple weeks, and it's, yeah, mid-December right now, a huge run of editions from artists, like open
Yeah.
editions, limited editions, open editions with, communicated burn mechanisms, all this stuff. And all of those things have been on, artist owned and deployed manifold smart contracts, which when I entered the space, virtually every edition, if not the majority of every collection of art collection, was on the shared OpenSea contract, which
Mm-hmm.
is like not great.
Mm.
Shout out OpenSea for like what they've done that is great, and in some ways, like
Right.
that contribution's still important, but
Yep.
to me, it's the recent use of tools like Manifold, and more recently, I've seen more artists using transient labs. Like that to me is a massive, I guess, like sign of um like something to be encouraged by, I guess. It's
Yeah.
like artists are leveraging the tech, and historically speaking, especially the newer entrants, not the OG crypto artists, but the newer entrants were probably less familiar with the tech underlying the space. Just as a
Mm.
blanket statement, not, I know there's many of you that are like devs and have been into crypto forever, but yeah, so that's been amazing to see. And I feel like the quality of projects, like to build during a bear market, it's the time to build. But you know, when there's already kind of crickets,
Mm.
you got to build something good in
Right.
order to, garner any serious excitement or interest. And therefore, like, I think the quality of stuff that we've seen come out recently, and in terms of like PFP projects, like the bar just keeps getting raised. Of course, there'll always be degenerate plays going on with unreasonable or completely fabricated roadmaps, but you like on the process of adoption and growth, you get everything, like, yeah. So I think it's better, man.
Mm. I think so too, and I have no perception of that. So I mean I'd like to say yes, but I came in late 2021, so not late 2021, early 2021. So like right at the tail end of it all. It's always great to hear that, and I ask questions like that because like when I first came into the space, that is what really helped. Oh, excuse me. That's really what helped like when I didn't really know how to build my conviction, we talked about that a little earlier, is one of the best skills to learn in this space is learning how to build conviction and learning how to do the vibe check. And I didn't really know how to navigate that. So what I did, my early vibe check assessment was like following people very similar to you, or people that had at least been through it, man. Like to ask, like, what are they saying? What do they think about the tech? What was it like? Even from people like Kevin Rose and Gary Vee, who had like built, helped like participate in the internet in the early days. What are they saying about this? That's the types of people that I would always like look to when I didn't really know how to build my own conviction. Like, these people have been through it. Like, even though it's still trusting another person outside of myself, it's probably the closest thing that I can get to it, and at least, have some trusted information is the point I'm trying to make. And so it's always great to hear perspectives like this, because I genuinely believe that like NFTs and crypto and crypto art, or NFTs and crypto art, are like the cultural layer of blockchain. Because I've also heard, D's say like, back in the last bear market, we didn't have any art. We just had a bunch of shit coins, and they're like, the vibes were down horrendously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool to like see that the artists that like have been here, whether they've come here in the past and they're just figuring out the tech, or they've been here for a little while longer, they're still continuing to create and have these fun mechanics. Because I think it was so easy, not just for artists, but just for anyone to come in and get mesmerized by the number go up. It's so easy for that to happen. And humans are just naturally greedy and want to catch the upside on that. And for the longest time, when the blinders are on, I always kind of wondered, which people were really here for the tech. Because that was honestly, Funghi, that was one of the first things that attracted me here, was like, oh, this is dope. Like immutable smart contracts, royalties, like, all these like really cool mechanics that you can do that you can't do with like not even remotely close to discounting physical art, but the things that you just can't do with a paintbrush. This is just a new genre of what we're getting to participate in.
Totally. Yeah. That's another thing. Like, and it's like, I remember, peak euphoria, bull market, seeing tweets from like KBM and D's and Debussy being like, you better be taking profits. Like, we're going to fucking zero. And just being like, I feel like D's wasn't he's more like playful maybe.
Yeah.
In his doomsaying or like reflections on the space. But seeing tweets from people like that and being like, you're a bummer. And like just like scrolling past. And then like, and it's totally like, I was just falling prey to, the fact that as a human, like, I'll never be rational. I'll always be rationalizing, meaning like I'm going to choose to believe something either because I want it to be true or I fear it to be true. And I just wanted, wanted myself to be correct, and that, no, we're up only like the cats are going to 69 ETH or whatever the hell, like I was smoking, like, shout out the cats. I'm not cast throwing shade, but yeah, I, now deeply appreciate and respect that cynicism that I noticed was inherent in virtually all of crypto Twitter, and a bunch of the more, I guess, like OG or multi-cycle veterans on the NFT Twitter side of things. And we do a little learning, and we do a little better next time, as Deeves might say.
It's super interesting. And I remember seeing those tweets. I was like, well, all of my bags are in, mostly art. So I'm just like, well, I'm not too worried about this right now. That was totally. At least my take on it.
That's great. Yeah, that's great to hear. And yeah, I think like as well, like because you kind of have like two choices when things start going downhill. It's like, do I give up? Like, do I leave? Do I go back to like a normal job? Or do I double down? And if I double down, like, how do I do so successfully? Um,
Right.
and I'm seeing a lot of people doubling down right now, and am myself. And yeah, I find that really exciting because I think, you know, there aren't that many people in this space that are super active. There's far fewer that are building things, whether they're, you know, like great podcasts, like such as yours or Deez's, or, you know, platforms and protocols like Hologram, Tessera. You know, there's lots of people doing really cool stuff. I saw some crazy Deca stuff out recently. I know Transient Labs is dropping some heat soon. Like Manifold, like there's people doing really cool stuff, and I think like at some point you know, you gotta choose to build something, like, or team up with some people that are already doing so, because I still think there's an immense amount of opportunity here. So I found that part of this like slowdown in the market really exciting and makes me very hopeful for the long term, like regardless of near or like midterm market movements. Yeah.
I like that. And I think that, alluding to, I think, both of our earlier points, was that the feeling of when this went to shit did not feel great. And I remember thinking to myself, well, Kyle, you got what you asked for. You know, you got a bear market. But I was like hoping that I still wouldn't feel this pit in my stomach every day when I wake up around the markets, you know? And yeah, man, to me, I've gotten to see a lot more cool things being built as a result of this, because it was like, oh wow. And to me though is that the projects that have even started in 2021, and whether they're still doing well or not well, you know, not well, if they're still continuously showing up, I think there's a lot to be said about that, you know, because to me that shows like their personal conviction in the tech at the very least, you know, or as like not wanting to let community members down, or having to, you know, they're still building and finding ways to do it despite what's happening around us and despite the world being in shambles. You know, something that and this also goes to hologram's a great example, but something that I was excited about is that switching a little bit more to the PFP collectible side, because, you know, as deeply rooted as I am in interviewing artists and like having this being primarily about that, I don't ever want to discount like how cool it is to have like the digital identity side of things. Like the PFP market can get a really bad rap because, you know, 90% of a lot of the projects that like were built last year aren't around, and that sucks. Or at least, you know, it hasn't been doing great. But I always was asking myself, like, okay, we have these like digital identities. Like, what do we do with them? Like, it's great that we have them, and that was like kind of like the entry point to a lot of us into the space. But now it's like, okay, cool. What is it that we can do with these things and explore with these things? And when you guys showed me hologram, that was a great like. I had like this like moment, this reaction, like, oh shit, that's awesome. Like, this is really cool. Like, sometimes I hate being in front of the camera, even though I'm already doxxed. But outside of this, you know, do you see, I guess, whether it's being built or not being built, or what you'd like to be built, or some ideas around how, you know, some of these digital identities can have some more utility than they currently do? I don't know if you've thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, at a base level, very bullish on it as like enjoyer of having a digital identity, because it's been like a real experiment for me. I've never had like, I don't know. I've always been a lurker on like Reddit, barely used any other apps, never used Twitter before I created my current Twitter account. I really liked it. So I see people, I see the adoption and acceptance of digital identity growing a lot. I see content being more digitally native in terms of the personalities and identities, meaning like, I'm sure that we will see, big TikTok accounts and YouTubers using things like, if not, actually hologram in the future. I see AI playing a really big component in that as well, in terms of both like content creation and, some semblance of like symbiotic relationships, like if you imagine Siri is like your little buddy, that if, because I think, I was just talking to someone actually just about where do I see all of this going. And the things that I think we'll see more of is, aggregation of experiences. Like I could imagine a future in which there is some tech that aggregates our digital experiences and identities and streamlines them in a way to both like improve our social and practical digital experiences and to just make them more efficient, where you can like very swiftly change environments, virtual environments or extended reality kind of environments. So yeah, I see a future in which like, yeah, digital identity is much more prevalent. It's not weird to be a, Bored Ape led like YouTube channel or like TikTok influencer or a band or like having, films and stuff like that. I see a lot of like cross IP use. So we've already seen a bunch of these PFPs be licensed out to various things. There's been, films and commercials made. I think it was like I was watching the World Cup and I saw Bored Apes in like the FIFA commercial.
Oh shit.
Which was insane. Or maybe it was like the Adidas commercial that was front and center. Like there was like Bored Ape stickers and maybe clothing on one of the players, and a sticker on their suitcase going to the World Cup. And I see these things like becoming more, just like more widely adopted, not just being like casual or subtle nods to this culture, like digital culture or internet culture, but more front and center. So I think these things just happen slowly. Like change for the general populace is hard to accept. I mean, just for humans in general, it can be very hard to accept change. The cool thing about all of the people in the Web3 and crypto, NFT, whatever umbrella term you want to use, the cool thing about those people is they're very attracted to or to change and thrive in a highly dynamic environment. And I think like younger generations that are alive now and will, are being born and so on and so forth. Like, I think that's just going to increase, where we're much more reactionary, I guess, or like to live in fast paced, like cross platform or, mixed platform experiences, like digitally, augmented reality, VR, all of that. And I see like the IP being used of these PFP communities and the brands being created by them to be playing a really big part in that, like kid shows and stuff like that. I could see like a Pudgy Penguins kid show, like being a hit. I could see like a Kanpai Pandas, like adult themed, like anime on Adult Swim or something like that. Like I could see all of these things happening and they don't feel like, pipe dreams. Like they feel like, yeah, like likely scenarios. And again, I'm heavily biased, but that's kind of where my head's at.
I like that. Yeah. I want to challenge the bias a little bit. Do you see any downsides or like anything? I want to play like both sides of the coin. If you've thought about both sides, have you seen any like what's like some of the biggest risks of this happening, or is there any downside that you see or that you've thought about?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something essential to the IRL, like face to face component of relationships. I think there is some sacrifice made to live fully digitally. And I think we all notice that when we meet up at these big like NFT related events where there's this like massive sense of collective catharsis over the hundreds of hours of Twitter spaces and whatever, Zoom meetings that we've had with our holograms or just whatever, when we haven't been able to just like hug each other and like share a drink.
Yeah.
And I always leave those events feeling like, wow, like I feel very like charged up by this, like IRL connection with all the people that I have been, admiring and enjoying getting to know throughout my time, like in the space digitally. So, and I think it's not great to just be inside all the time. Like there's no way that's good for you. Like like during the bull market, there'd be days where I was like, if I didn't have a couple dogs, like I don't know if I would be aware if it's a rainy day right now. Like
yes,
like that's the alpha. Get a dog and take really good care of your dog. Try and take them on, many walks a day. I really feel like I'm walking myself more often than not. Even now, like very busy in the bear market or the fuck around and find out market.
Right.
And yeah, so yeah, I think there's that's not great as well. And it's, you do have to think. So like I've spent a lot of time like studying like neuroscience and neuropsychology and just how the brain works. Like was a big part of my focus in university. And constant streams of dopamine, not the best, like not the most sustainable. And social media, which is kind of where we default to, being Twitter or Discord or wherever, does get those like dopamine hits probably a little too regularly. And it's really easy to spend a day and go outside and be like, wow, outside. Like, I feel like you either have the experience of like, wow, outside's amazing, or like, outside's cold and not comfortable and it's not exciting enough or something, like, and it can, I think, become harder to have genuine interactions. I feel like that's something I've been trying to work on, even digitally or, virtually, have more one-on-one calls like this, with friends, instead of defaulting to just like catching up over Twitter spaces and Twitter DMs. Like, yeah, I think like you do have to focus on like quality of connection. Yeah.
I've been noticing that a lot more, and I'm glad you said coming from the background that I've come from, being sober, the constant dopamine hits are, it doesn't usually pan out well. I can tell you that much. And yeah, the quality of like, I remember thinking about this the other day. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's, as someone who, like, I don't really like big crowds, unless it's like a Tool show or something like that, then I like big crowds. That's like the only time I really enjoyed that. Or if I'm NFT NYC or, maybe next year Basel. Like, I just don't, it's hard for me to have these like one-to-one connections. And I remember thinking to myself, like when I was first coming into the space, is that I was in just like pure goblin mode of like building relationships of like, like reaching out to as many people as I could, forming these like solid connections and really just trying to a lot of times capitalize and being an opportunist and being early in a space where there's so many bright people. I remember having the epiphany is that like, hold on, like I've been here for a little over a year and a half. Like, how about let's just like double down on the people who I vibe the strongest with, you know? And when I had that epiphany, I was like, dude, this becomes so much more easier. Like having phone calls with people, having WhatsApp conversations with people, even just like being privileged enough to like have some of these people's personal numbers and to be able to just like hit them up. Like that has been one of the most valuable things that like I've gotten to experience since I've been here, or at least in the past couple months. Cause I'm telling you, man, COVID, as much as I enjoy being fully remote, like COVID definitely did do a number. It was like, it's weird. It's a catch-22. I genuinely think that if COVID hadn't happened, that we may not have seen the wild bull run that we did with all this like excess capital being thrown around. And, that was, but also at the same time, like it just does a lot of damage. And I noticed that like even just getting out and doing normal things has been like a big struggle for me. Just to like go out and do that. But to the last point, man, having a dog, like, man, greatest thing, one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me, because there's times where like whether it's a tough day or for whatever reason, or like the markets are going crazy or I'm doing something for the podcast, like that reminder to like get up and go do something. And like this creature that has one of those beautiful souls needs to be fed or needs to be walked or needs to be, trained. That has been one of my biggest saving graces, and having that like personal connection to that being, I don't know, man. I don't know where I was going with that, but dogs are great. It's
shout out dogs and shout out COVID, the unofficial sponsor of the success of live social audio and the NFT bull run of 2021. Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think like it's also kind of mirrored in my approach to these like conference events. Like I still haven't been to a conference. I think the only one that I like, I just missed Metaverse Miami. I heard that was done really well. And I'll check that out next year for sure. But I think the only other one I've heard's done very well is VCon.
Yeah.
Shout out.
I've heard great things.
Gary V for killing it on that. Yeah. My approach to the rest or to conferences that I don't attend has been, at first I was going to everything and it was like so many big events with tons of people. And I kind of was riding like, the dopamine wave of the bull run to, I guess, get me through those events where like, I'm also not a super extroverted person. I definitely retreat to myself or my dogs to like recharge.
Yep.
But I was going to all of those big events. I feel like over time, like in Miami, as an example, the Shillr team, we just rented a house that could fit everyone. So we could actually like get together as a team for everyone that was able to go. And then we just chill there for like the first half of every day, have breakfast together and just chill and do some work and have a swim. And then the rest of the events that I went to were by and large like smaller gatherings. And I've definitely made, when I'm looking at what to put on the books for sure, in terms of events, it's usually the smaller format ones because you're never going to be able to have a great conversation with everyone you want to when you go to one of these things. You're definitely not going to if you only ever go to the raves or parties or clubs or whatever. So I try and, go to a couple of the smaller things each day in the evenings. And that worked out way better. Like I came home still feeling like a fairly, intact whole human being. Whereas in the past, in the first couple of things I went to, I was like, I cannot talk to anyone for a while. Yeah, just from being like over socialized, I guess. And yeah, for sure. It's it's I don't know. I think the space also really serves introverts well. I think the ease of kind of like, I don't know, choosing to just like not go on Twitter or not, check your DMs or emails or whatever is really appealing. To just like if you're on a Twitter space, it's not that awkward to just leave, even if you're like on the stage. Whereas if you're like in a circle of friends and you just wander off, like people are like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, are they okay? Like, did I say something? And those things are always like stressful for introverts. You're like, oh, was I awkward? Should I have said I was leaving? And there's something, I think, appealing to introverts about the ephemeral sides of digital identity, the ability to like enter and exit freely and to change as well, like to show up, as a different avatar or whatever every day if you wanted to. I think is appealing.
Dude, I couldn't agree with you more. And something that I thought about was kind of like the arguments around digital identity now are almost like they're not the same, but they're in the same tone or the same, just the same tone of like the way video games were going to ruin everyone's lives, and how video games caused violence, or video games were not going to be anything. You're not productive when you're playing video games. And we're kind of like it's like a very similar, theme where it's like, some of the best gamers are some of the best NFT traders, because they understood digital goods and concepts and digital identity and the importance of that.
RuneScape. Yeah. I know a lot of those people are like long time RuneScape maxis.
Yeah, dude. That's what I'm saying. I feel like I'm more of a Call of Duty, Halo, shoot 'em up kind of guy, so like, but that's the importance of like working with a team digitally. Like we were getting very early experiences of digital communities of people that had similar interests, that we may not have met, that I say may not, that we probably would not have met otherwise at that scale. And then there was the birth of esports and everything that's happening there. So it's like, I feel like this is kind of like that same conversation where people are very scared about, if I can't see their face and I can't trust them. It's like, I think I told you at the earliest podcast, like there's a lot more people I trust. Obviously there's people I know their faces I trust very, very, very dearly, a lot, but there's a lot more people that I've met digitally where it's like I've never met them before or I've never seen their face before, but yet there's this weird sense of trust, and It kind of like throws that argument out the window,
Yeah, well, I think the people who I think like people in this space understand, or many of them understand that, it may sound cheesy to say, but like the only thing on par with the immutability of a blockchain is reputation and trust. Like it's, you can't help but remember when someone has wronged you or your friends or the public at large. And I think the people that get that, and who are really committed to being here, don't question like, oh, are the founders doxxed? Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't need to know. And I think that kind of comes down to vibe check too. Like, I don't need to see your LinkedIn, like, or your face. Like, I need to like hear you speak. Like Twitter Spaces, like live audio is great for that, where people have to kind of, are forced to by and large show up like as they are and to be who they are. It's harder to curate yourself in real time than it is to, fake something on the timeline. And yeah, for me, it was like, I personally can't imagine, trying to ever do something maliciously and like ruining whatever goodwill that I have like accumulated or like it's very important to me to act like in an ethically sound way. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, because it's like I'm finally like, like I think I spent a lot of my life prior wondering if I would ever meet or be surrounded by people that I felt this inspired as I do here. And if I'd ever find an environment that consistently captured my interest and motivated me to learn and to not be stagnant, because I have horrendous ADHD. And so it's very easy for me to like figure something out, get bored, like slack or just like do something else. Whereas I haven't had that experience here. And yeah, so I think, I think for people that feel similarly like lucky to have found the group of friends that they found in the space, or to be surrounded by the people they're surrounded and have the access to information and connections that they have, for having acted like with some degree of like honor and transparency or authenticity. I think those people by and large like are not going to throw that away or spin up a new, like, I can't spin up like a new social account and like come up with an accent. Like I'm like, I'm horrible at accents, but like the thought of that, I just like can't imagine ever, like I think there's like a ton of kind of like natural or organic motivation to act accordingly. I think, people feel really lucky to have the opportunities they have and want to do whatever they can to preserve those opportunities or the possibility of future opportunities, whether they're like meeting great people that they form awesome friendships with, or like building something dope that people want to care about. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, I think you've summed up a lot of my thoughts. Like, I couldn't have said it better, man. I think about that constantly. Of course, like as a human, we all have our shortcomings, and like there's thoughts that will pass through, but it's like I never think twice to act on them. It's like there's no way I'd ever intentionally do something because it matters that much. I've never, very similar to you. I was like, I missed out on a lot of the early days of the internet. Well, number one, because I was like 10, so it's like not much opportunity to be had there at 10. But the Web 2 kind of like early days of some of the e-commerce and like social platforms and stuff like that, I missed out on that too. And so that was part of it. So it's like, damn, I just want to be around smart people who like sharpen me to be a better human. And like now that I found that, like there's no way I'd even think about considering tarnishing that reputation and like showing up the way I like, and I like just consistently doing my best to show up the way I know I can, because it actually matters. Results matter. Like results matter here, and showing up matters, and not just like tweeting GM and then going back to bed. That's kind of like what I've taken from that. So I want to, we've been going for about hour and a half, hour and 40. I want to start wrapping things up here, man, because I know we both got to go eat. But, I was occasionally checking your vault out, and I think I might start doing this. So you're the first. Is I noticed a piece by Alizé called Between Realms. And I remember when you picked it up, I was super jealous. And I was looking at it, you're super jealous. And like, I fucking love this piece and would love to, like, as kind of like a sign off as well, including your links of like showing, like, kind of like explain like where or like what made you want to collect this. So like, what did you see in this piece?
Yeah, here, let me pull it up. I would definitely like to be looking at it when I speak about it. But yeah, I had been noticing Alizé's work for quite a while, like just very struck by something to do with each piece. Like I feel like I gravitate towards artists whose work pushes me to either think about something or feel something or makes me uncomfortable in some way. This piece definitely made me uncomfortable. This collection coping mechanisms is beautiful, like so well curated. I'll read the description: an ode to the escapism that keeps us afloat. To escape the feeling realm is a coping mechanism that projects us into the safety of other worlds beyond our own, where identity and memory are lost and weightlessness is found. It is to come out of one's body and into no thought, a suspension of oneself floating in their own abyss. There is a cathartic beauty to this happening, and to recognize it is to claim its intricate entanglement with our wholeness as sentient creatures. So, bars right there.
Man.
Yeah. So, as someone who has definitely leaned on many coping mechanisms throughout their life, and who has, I've gone to therapy for years, have really tried to work on that to be more comfortable with myself, to be more comfortable or appreciative of like my past self. And yeah, I thought that this collection, Coping Mechanisms, was just beautiful and really profound. And each image, if you link it in the description of this when it comes out, I highly recommend people to check it out. But each image is really showing symbolic representation of a coping mechanism. And between realms, for me, the description of this piece is: I lifted and my soul became a reflection of who I longed to be. And as I kind of referenced earlier, I, for a long time really wondered, like, am I ever going to find my place in the world? I still wonder about that, to some degree. But yeah, I was waiting for, is it going to be a certain job? Is it going to be like a certain friend group? And then I stumbled into this space, and I really felt like it was a big leap of faith, and it, has so far worked out pretty great. And I felt much more aligned, in present of who I once kind of wanted to be, or at least like how I wanted to be spending my time and what kind of impact I wanted to have. So this piece really represented a lot of that to me. And visually, like, of course, it's stunning. And this mirrored reflection of oneself over the water, like, really made me think about how, as a fully pseudonymous person in this space, who's, quite guarded with, like, I don't dox, like, shout out everyone that doesn't ever take a picture or something at an event. I'm quite guarded over having my like IRL identity and digital identity separate. And yet they're so close, so it made me think of like, at what point, am I kind of falling too deeply into the realm of my digital self, or the realm in which that self is expressed? Am I just hovering between it, as this like subject is? And how different is the reflection between my real self and my digital self? And looking at this, like, they are mirrored images. And that's something that I've always been very intentional in trying to preserve. Like, I had worries over entering this space as fully pseudonymous person and allowing the air of like anonymity to kind of coerce me into like acting inauthentically. And what I found was the complete opposite.
GM. And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Boonafide Experience podcast. Unfortunately, we had to cut this recording short due to some internet quality issues or just some internet issues on both of our ends. And I just could not get the quality to where you could really understand it without getting distracted. So I do deeply apologize for that. If you enjoyed this, please go ahead and leave a like and subscribe, or a like and a comment. It helps get this podcast up to the top of the leaderboard and helps get this podcast into the ears of more people who need to hear it. Whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, it's all the same button. And if you are a super fan, if you really enjoyed it, I would appreciate it if you kindly left a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast platform or on my website, www.boonafide.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode, and I look forward to the next one.